Welcome everybody to Tahoe Truckee Unified School District Board of Education meeting, March 17th. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Could we have roll call? Oh. Is Lupita here?
Yes. Before that, do you approve the board meeting? Roll call. Member Libat?
Aye. What? Yes. Presente.
Member Hennessy?
Yes, here.
Member Driller?
Yes.
President Surek?
Here.
Acting President Larson?
Here.
Thank you.
Microphone.
Okay. We had closed session. There was no reportable action from closed session. The agenda, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Trustee Larson, there is one change. Staff would like to remove agenda item 9.0, recognition contributions to the educational community. Typically, this happens periodically throughout the year, and we acknowledge an educational partner. This agenda item was inadvertently placed on this agenda, and we'd like to remove it and put it on the next agenda accordingly.
Thank you. That'll be fine. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as corrected?
I'll make a motion to approve the corrected agenda minus 9.0.
I'll second.
Vote?
Member Libat?
Aye.
Member Hennessy?
Aye.
Member Driller?
Aye.
President Surek?
Aye.
Clerk Larson?
Yes.
Thank you.
And now we have opportunity for public comment. We have 3 minutes per comment for a total of 30 minutes for the time limit for the total comment period. And if there are more, we'll listen to them at the end of the agenda. No action or discussion shall be undertaken on any item not appearing on the posted agenda, except the members of the board or the Tahoe Truckee Unified School District staff may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed. So we have one public comment. Mr. David Stakely.
She's telling you about
Mr. Stakely, welcome.
Nice to see everyone. Okay, great. Start my timer.
You have 3 minutes.
Great, thank you. Hi, my name is David Stakely, and I am a teacher at North Tahoe High School. I am excited to attend my first board meeting in person in a year. Now that we are back in in-person instruction, I look forward to attending more board meetings, like as we used to in the past. I would hope in the future there is a way to have the public attend board meetings, given that we've got capacity, social distancing space for classrooms. We got a big room in here. I hope we can fit some more people in here in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stakely. I see no more comments from the public at this time.
That was the...
In-person comments. We now go to recordings.
Yep. And 1 second while I load up the recordings. There were about 12 the last time I was in there.
Kim has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Kim, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interject here, but I do want to acknowledge that we did receive written public comment and that I have read all of the written public comment. And I believe a lot of my co-board members have also. So thank you very much.
Okay. All right. So we'll go ahead and start with the first comment from Justalalo.
Hello, my name is Jess DeLello, and I am the president of TTEA. Good evening, board members and members of the public. While we are currently in negotiations about salary, and we are presently having a disagreement about the best way to allocate money, the abundance of new money coming into TTUSD, I would like to make something exceedingly and abundantly clear. The disagreements that we are currently having with the district regarding wages will in no way affect our goals to return our members to the classroom 5 days a week in the safest possible way. We are confident we will be able to resolve any outstanding issues quickly in formal negotiations this week and next, and importantly, before the target date to return. Both the TTEA and TTUSD bargaining teams have worked hard all year and have already settled the major issues that allowed us to return to in-person school safely earlier this fall and again this winter. I repeat, we don't want our disagreement about salary to hold up the planned return to 5-day at the end of the month. We know our students have been through too much this year already to put up with another disruption. We know that TTEA cannot make the decision to go back to school 5 days a week or when the first day for the return will come. But TTEA members are ready to return when TTUSD does set that date. TTEA, the board, and the district have taken great strides to ensure that the safety concerns of staff, students, and families has been addressed from the beginning of the pandemic last March, and we feel confident that they will continue to follow along in this tradition regardless of our current disagreement about budgeting. I look forward to finishing the MOU with the district for 5-day-a-week in-person instruction and the regular contract negotiations with the district regarding salary soon. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you, Jess.
The next comment is from Andy Beatty.
Dear TTUSD Board and Superintendent Geisel, after reading the union update yesterday, I was saddened and disappointed. I have watched all of my colleagues this year working harder than ever, pivoting on a moment's notice, creating meaningful experience for students, and putting our best foot forward each and every day. I thought that you were all proud of us and what we were doing. I heard you say that you were honored to work with such dedicated teachers. That is why I am mystified that it appears you are not willing to negotiate with the union. The negotiating team came in with a request of a 5% raise. You said 2%. The negotiating team tried to meet you at 3%, and you refused. Can you imagine how that makes us feel? It makes us feel unappreciated, undervalued, and disappointed. You need your teachers to return to full-time teaching with energy and enthusiasm. And now that morale is low, and that is because of your actions. You have the power to change this course, and I truly hope that you will seriously consider doing so. Thank you for hearing my public comment. Andrea Beatty.
The next
Thank you.
comment is from Rachel Falk.
Hello, board members, Superintendent, Chief Learning Officer Geisel, and cabinet members. This is Rachel Falk, and I'm a parent of 4 former TTUSD students, the counselor at Glenshire Elementary School, and a member of the negotiating team. TTUSD, again, has had a year of all-time record revenue, total budget of $77 million, up from $70.6 million in 2018-19, a 9.22% increase in 2 years. That total revenue number does include some one-time COVID relief funds specific to this year. But the story is much the same when you look at ongoing tax revenue. Property tax is at an all-time record high, as are the house selling prices. In looking at the projected forecast from the California Association of Realtors, our housing selling prices will continue to skyrocket, and therefore the taxes will continue to rise, and the school district will benefit. Please include your staff in your spending plan. I believe it is fair and just to ask to be included in a district budget plan when times are good and prosperous. As you know, we live in a very expensive resort area where everything is expensive. Food, gas, utilities, entertainment, etc. When we do not get a cost of living allocation, we are essentially having to live off of less money and reduce our purchasing power. When times are tough and the economy is down, we rally behind the district and support the lack of a raise. When times are good and the local economy is flourishing, we are asking to be included in the district's financial plan. I so appreciate our district being fiscally prudent and saving for a rainy day. But when the current financial status and 3-year forecast shows even higher property tax numbers, this is the time to be fair and give our members a wage percentage that is commensurate with where we live. This has been a difficult year for all of us. As educators, we have tried our best to be positive, flexible, and resilient every time you have asked. Now we are asking you to be positive, flexible, and resilient with your cost of living percentage offer. Thank you so much for considering.
The next comment comes from Eric Bennett.
Hi, my name is Eric Bennett. I'm a special education teacher at North Tahoe High School. I appreciate the hard work everyone's putting into these negotiations and the opportunity to express my point of view on this as a member of TTUSD certificated staff. I just want to make a general comment about the salary negotiations. Long story short, I am moving to Reno because I've simply been priced out of the local real estate market here. Despite being nearly maxed out on units towards salary advancement, having a summer job. With all the meetings I'm expected to attend, there's just no feasible way to take on a second job after school. So hence I'm having to move to Reno. Anything additional to my salary would have made a big difference, but instead I'll have to settle for a 2-hour daily commute because there's nowhere for locals to go. Thanks again for the opportunity to voice my concern, and I hope we can come to an agreement here. Thank you very much.
The next comment is from Sarah Avery.
I was surprised yesterday to receive an email from TTEA with an unproductive negotiations update. We were told that the school district made a 2% offer and is unwilling to increase the offer. The numbers presented in the email make this offer unacceptable. TTUSD has received a 9.22% increase in revenue over the past 2 years. Looking at the current real estate market, it is quite apparent that this will only increase. How can offering teachers 2% be justified? Over the past 5 to 7 years, morale in our school district seems to have increased, as well as the trust between teachers and administration. This was after a period of fighting for every dime we received in salary increases, even when it was apparent the district had received adequate funding for a raise. When there was an economic downturn, teachers adjusted to larger class sizes and no increase in pay. This offer of 2% brings me right back to this time. As everyone is aware, this last year has been unprecedented for everyone. As teachers, we have shifted at a moment's notice, trying to keep our students' needs foremost in our mind. We have adapted our teaching methods, classrooms, and materials to meet the current guidelines. One way to commend these efforts would be to acknowledge our efforts with a salary increase. Honestly, I would think a district would try to maximize the amount that they offered to us instead of getting by with the bare minimum. I've been down this path before. I know all of the steps that will be taken if this cannot be resolved. I look forward to seeing the numbers collected by CTA to see if our request is indeed reasonable based on the district's finances. I suspect that we will find 3% is much lower than the district can afford. Thank you.
The next comment is from Paula Bossler.
Good evening, members of the board and Superintendent Geisels. As a member of the TTA negotiating team, I'm well informed of the district's finances as well as the record revenue seen yet again this year. After everything our membership has done this year to continue providing quality instruction and support for our students, the district has not matched that effort with the cost of living wage increase. For both sides to be separated by 1% or $285,000, while the district reserve grew by over $2.6 million and is now at 13.9%, well over the 10% threshold, that shows me that the district prioritizes looking good on paper instead of paying salaries that keep up with inflation. Our district has weathered 2 multi-year construction bond projects and a global pandemic. Houses in the so-called cheaper neighborhood of Kings Beach, where I live, are now selling for just under $1 million. Our district is financially stable, and our property tax revenue continues to climb. It's time for our members' salaries to keep up, especially when over 56% of our members didn't see a raise through step or column this year. Sincerely, Paula Bossler, TTEA negotiator.
The next email is, or I'm sorry, voice comment is from Danielle Vieth.
Hello, Superintendent and members of the board. Thank you for hearing my comment this evening. I'm calling in regards to the negotiations between TTEA and the school board concerning teacher salary. I'm an elementary school teacher and a mom of 2 elementary school students in our district. I feel incredibly grateful to work with the students and their families at my school, to have my children learn from and thrive with their teachers, and to live with my family in the Tahoe Truckee area. I was shocked to hear that the board rejected a counteroffer of a 3% raise in teacher salaries. Looking at the record revenue from the past 2 years, the district can afford a 3% increase in teacher pay. In fact, a 3% raise would mean TTEA salaries constitute a smaller percentage of the overall budget as compared to last year. Additionally, a 3% raise is barely enough to keep up with inflation, let alone the rising cost of living in this area. Without a substantial raise, many teachers will not be able to afford to live here anymore. Having teachers who live in the community where they work benefits students and their families. When teachers live in the community where they work, they are more invested in the community, they better understand the needs of the community, and they have more time to give to community projects and outreach. Without a raise in salary, TTUSD will see a higher turnover rate in teachers, which research has shown negatively impacts student success. A higher salary attracts and keeps high-quality teachers, which, of course, is what our children deserve. Please invest in your teachers by giving us a salary increase of more than your proposed 2%. When you invest in us, you are showing the community not only that teachers are valuable members of our community, but also that children are valuable as well. Thank you for your time.
The next comment is from Gina Gertzmacher.
Hello, and thank you all for being here tonight. My name is Gina Grutzmacher, and I'm a second grade teacher at TTUSD. I'd first like to thank the ongoing hard work and unwavering support of TTEA. We thank you. We understand the union's proposal and the data percentage points provided in regards to budget and raises. We have not heard the district's take on the proposal and the percentage points on either of these topics. I would like to state it is very important to understand all aspects of this proposal and the data which backs both sides. My questions are, Is there actually 6.5% available for raises? If so, with the district's proposal of 2%, where is the other portion of the percentages being allocated to? To say the least, this year has been a challenge, but nevertheless, the teachers have persisted, changing plans with small notices, creating engaging and fun lessons for students who are slowly losing their hope, supporting their mental health needs, and often the mental health needs of some of their family members. All the while attempting to stay mentally and physically healthy ourselves while suffering loss, instability, and ridicule. I would first like to acknowledge the fact that our district has and continues to fight for our safety in returning to 5-day-a-week instruction. This includes the MERV filters, the new air purifiers, desk shields, KN95s and N95 respirators, endless hours from our administration of reconfiguring classrooms and school sites, new furniture, the list goes on. That being said, since COVID, living costs have increased significantly, especially in this amazing mountain town that we call home. Yes, the 5% increase to our salaries will help our cost of living, but in my personal opinion, the difference between 5%, 3%, and 2% raise proposal is quite frankly not about the cost of living. It is more about the regard and respect that the teachers deserve. Without that, we feel our positions are expendable, and our extremely hard work during a year of ongoing suffering goes without the financial recognition we deserve. We will continue to speak up about this subject, and unfortunately, this is not going away. Thank you so much for your time and your serious consideration on this matter.
The next voice comment is from Jennifer Kavanaugh.
Good evening, members of the board and Superintendent Geisels. Thank you for hearing my comment. I'm a teacher and member of this community. I've been blessed to spend nearly 5 years working with students and parents in our area, and I am committed to supporting the families at my school, not just academically, but also emotionally and culturally. I must speak in regards to the current state of negotiations between TTEA and the district. I was surprised and then hurt and finally confused when notified that the board rejected a request for a 3% raise in teacher salaries. The district has enjoyed more than a 9% increase in revenue over the last 2 years. Property values have more than doubled in our area in the last year, and that property tax income is likely to continue to climb. Thus, a 3% raise, which does not keep up with inflation, let alone the rising cost of living in the Truckee-Tahoe area, seems humble and reasonable. A reasonable raise also would support the students in our area. Michigan State University reports that paying teachers more leads to retention of teachers. Research additionally shows that more experienced teachers have better learning outcomes for students, which I know we all want for our kids here in TTUSD. A raise would also attract teachers to fill the positions that the district has stated they want to create and fill per their most recent negotiations update. Every teacher I know at my site and in the district generally is passionate, hardworking, and has a positive and loving regard toward the community. The 3% raise the union has asked for only costs about $285,000 more than the 2% raise. With a budget of more than $77 million, surely the district can show that they value their teachers that much. We deserve to afford to live in the community we serve and care about. Please show that you value that for us, because it also shows the community that you value our work, what we give to our students, and in fact values the students themselves. Thank you.
The next comment is from Jess Darkenwald.
Hi, my name is Jess Darkenwald, and I'm a counselor at Kings Beach Elementary. I often say that I have the best job in the district. The people that I worked with or who I have worked with, including the teachers, classified staff, maintenance, support, admin, are all dedicated, thoughtful, and smart professionals. They truly care about and love the kids. It makes my job so much easier. I know this has been a difficult year, and I really appreciate the exhaustion regarding the number of decisions that everybody is having to make. I'm not going to repeat the numbers. I know that you have heard it and that you will hear it, but I think it's pretty clear that the money is there, it's possible, and I'm hoping you will push to give teachers a 3% raise. TTUSD can afford it, they deserve it, and it's the right thing to do. Thank you for providing the public an opportunity to speak.
The next comment's from James McMaster.
To the TTUSD Board and Superintendent Chief Learning Officer Geisel. My name is James McMaster, and I'm a teacher and coach at Alder Creek Middle School. I'm also a parent of two wonderful kids who have attended Tahoe Lake and who currently are at Truckee Elementary and Alder Creek. We are all excited about returning to 5 days a week in-person instruction. But I just wanted to give a huge thank you to my kids' teachers, both past and present. I don't think we say thank you enough. With going back to 5 days, we will have transitioned 5 times this past year. Despite all these changes, their passion and dedication is on display every single day. They've dug deep to make sure my kids are challenged to learn in new ways. They have embraced new technologies to keep the kids engaged. And they have shown care and patience when the kids and their parents have been stressed out. If you talk to any teacher, they will tell you they have been working harder than ever before. They're stressed. They spend extra hours creating lesson plans that can engage both the online and the in-person student. And again, we have transitioned 5 times. Teachers are worried about the emotional well-being of their students. And of course, why wouldn't they be? They call, they send postcards to make sure students are okay. Some even make house calls. And they spend a lot of time focused on being the best for their students. And how many times have we heard from our admin to focus on self-care, which is especially difficult with rising costs in housing, insurance, food, and basic necessities. We all know that since the pandemic started, a dollar no longer goes as far. What about those teachers who rent? They have to deal with the fear of rising rents or a landlord who wishes to sell quickly to take advantage of booming Truckee real estate market. Take a look at Facebook and you'll see post after post of residents who are desperate for affordable housing. The community and the district have asked a lot from our teachers. And our teachers are absolute superheroes, warriors, and champions for our kids. So it's time to reflect and ask yourselves, what have I done publicly to acknowledge this? What have I done publicly to show that teachers are celebrated, valued, and respected? I've watched and listened to quite a few board meetings this past year, and I haven't heard it, nor has the board or district shown it. We have asked our teachers to dig, be creative, and challenge the limits of their potential. I ask you to do the same.
The next voice comment is from Jesse Ernst.
Hello. I'm an 8th year teacher in TTUSD and a 15-year career teacher. First, I would like to say thank you to TTUSD and TTEA for your support in what has been the most challenging year for all of us. Your positions must be exhausting, and your efforts to keep teachers and students safe has not gone unnoticed. However, I would like to express my concern for the teachers in this district who have been here for years and are losing housing and being thrown into a terrifying market. The outcome of the recent salary negotiations does not aid much comfort to this situation. My fiance and I, like many others in our community, are finding ourselves displaced of housing after the influx of residents to our area during COVID. Last year, we were shopping for homes to purchase to finally put down roots in this place we've lived in and loved for 14 years. We waited too long and are now facing the reality that we are literally being priced out of the area. There are no homes to buy and no affordable long-term rentals. I personally know of 4 longtime TTUSD teachers in this same situation currently. If I know of 4, how many others are out there and how many more are to come? These are teachers that are dedicated, educated, and have spent years here building and fostering programs that directly support our TTUSD students. Losing these teachers and their knowledge and expertise within TTUSD would be taking a step in a backward direction for the district. These are the teachers we need to keep. If the district does not take financial steps now to protect them, it will lose them. Thank you.
The next voice comment is from Laurel Raymore.
Hello, Ms. Geisel and members of the board. Thank you for hearing my comment tonight. I'm speaking in regards to the negotiations between TTEA and the school board concerning salary negotiations. My name is Laurel Raymore and I teach first grade at Kings Beach Elementary. I was very disappointed to hear that the board rejected a counteroffer of a 3% raise in teacher salaries, which was a significant compromise from TTEA's original 5% proposal. The compromise 3% raise request is barely enough to keep up with the projected 2021 national inflation rate, let alone the fast rising cost of living here in this area. Without a substantial raise, teachers won't be able to afford to live in this community anymore. Having teachers who live in the community where they work benefits everyone. When teachers live in the community where we work, we are more invested in the community, we know the needs of the community, and we have more time to give to community projects. When teachers can afford to live in this community, we will have the opportunity to interact with students and parents outside of the classroom at community events and understand firsthand the local issues that families face, thereby deepening the ties between TTUSD and local families. But without a sustainable raise in salary, TTUSD will see both a high turnover rate for teachers and a workforce that's forced to commute into the area from Reno, Sparks, or Carson City, which is detrimental to student success and bad for the community. Our children deserve the best education, and higher salary is essential in attracting and keeping high-quality teachers. Given the more than 9% increase in revenue to TTUSD over the past 2 years, it seems that there is more than enough money in the budget to give teachers a much higher raise than the proposed 2%. This money should be used to raise teacher salaries now. Teachers in this district work extremely hard and are fully dedicated to this community. We deserve a raise that keeps up with inflation and allows us to live here. Please invest in the future of our community by raising teacher salaries by more than 2% this year. When you invest in us, you are showing the community not only that teachers are valued, but also that you believe our children are important. Thank you for your time.
The next voice comment is from Heidi Bushway-Verkler.
On Wednesday, March 3rd, the staff at North Tahoe School was informed that the fifth grades would be moving to Tahoe Lake Elementary and Kings Beach Elementary effective this fall 2021 after being at North Tahoe School for 12 years. After first learning about this possibility via public comment during a school board meeting on Wednesday, February 24th, I'm sure you can imagine the varied emotions that ran through almost the entire North Tahoe School staff throughout the week. Many unanswered questions, emails, etc. On March 3rd, some school board members were applauding this decision, reflecting back on their emotional decision that happened in 2009. What makes this decision something to applaud? At least 4 full-time classroom teachers will be involuntarily transferred. Several special education teachers and instructional assistants are currently unsure of where they will be next year. Will they be located at one school for an entire day? Will they need to travel between schools in the middle of their workday? I find it to be disheartening that this decision was being applauded by school board members. Many people are deeply hurt by this decision. Many people are unsure of what their professional life will look like and how that will affect their own families. It's been promised that North Tahoe School will remain whole next year, but what about the year after that? Fifth grade students will be staying at the elementary school, supposedly now that the renovations at both sites are complete from the taxpayer-supported bond measure, Measure E. Is this truly why fifth grade is moving back? Is there really room for these classes in those renovated schools? Rumor has it that portables will be delivered from right out to Tahoe Lake, and the fifth grades will be housed in the portables. Kings Beach has portables already on site, and the fifth grades will be housed there in those portables that were built in the late 80s and 90s, and they were not renovated. For those of you who don't know, the current fifth grade classes are in all close proximity to one another in a clean, spacious school where their doors open to an interior hallway. Students do not need to exit the building to use the restroom, walk to the office, or get to their elective classes. So as you reflect upon this decision, this is not a time for healing for many of us at North Tahoe School. This is a tumultuous time for a community of educators and learners. This decision and timeline was made without any transparency to those of you to those of us who are truly affected. This decision is very disruptive during an already extremely sensitive and difficult time. We're living and teaching through a major pandemic. This may relieve you of some stress, but this adds another layer of stress, confusion, uncertainty to an amazing group of people at North Tahoe School. I was saddened and disheartened for the lack of compassion for the people mostly affected by this decision. This is not a celebratory decision for North Tahoe School. Thank you for your time.
And the last voice comment is from Teresa Apolito.
Good evening, evening. My name is Teresa Polito, and I have been a teacher in TTUSD since 1997. Over the 20-plus years I have worked in Truckee, I have seen the relationship between TTEA and the district evolve from what I considered a non-existent one into a more transparent, supportive, and respectful relationship. At the same time, I've also seen my workload increase, insurance costs skyrocket, and working conditions become ever-changing. While I am proud to be a teacher in TTUSD, I am discouraged at the current state of negotiations between TTEA and the district. TTUSD has record revenues again this year. If TTUSD were to keep the percentage of TTEA salaries the same part of the overall budget as last year, this would equate to a raise of over 6.5% for TTEA members. TTA is only asking for 3%. This proposed 3% increase is not only fair, it has been earned by every hardworking teacher in the district. The Placer County Office of Education Teachers Union just agreed with their administration to a 3% raise this year and a 2% for next year. PCOE is not a basic aid district like Tahoe Truckee Unified, and overall has dramatically lower revenue and tax increases coming in. Tahoe Truckee Unified can afford to give its teachers a 3% raise. We deserve it. As more is being asked of teachers, please show that you value our dedication and hard work, especially during this pandemic, by accepting the proposal for a 3% increase in salary. Thank you for your time.
And that concludes the public comment. And just a note, I think Kim did say it too, but there were written public comments over email. Those are compiled in a Google document and shared with the board and will be attached to the board minutes in an archive.
Yes, and I did read the email comments that were sent in. I'd just like to say one thing. We certainly do appreciate and respect our teachers, in spite of what you may think. I would also compliment you on looking at the numbers and attempting to understand them, and I would encourage you to stick with the meeting tonight and listen to Todd's presentation on where this money's going. I think you've seen half of the story, and it's important that you see the whole story before you make your conclusions, but thank you.
May I?
Yes, Kim.
Thank you. I would like to exercise what we say in the agenda and make a brief comment after public comment. I agree that Todd's presentation this evening should present actually the entire picture, not just very small snippets of financial information related to the district. So, as I've said, since I became a school board member, I value teachers. Teachers are amazing. They're heroes in my eyes because we're in the kid business, right? Our business is to educate our kids, and all of our employees contribute to that. We as school board members have absolutely no reason to not compensate our employees who provide services to our kids, except for this. We have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that our district survives these kids and the kids next year and the kids after that, and we're able to provide a quality education into the future. And that's what Todd Rivera and our amazing financial staff at the district, along with our chief learning officer, strive to do. So I, as a board member, am balancing my need to provide fiscal stability and long-term educational opportunities for all of our children with the wish to compensate all of our staff in an appropriate way. So I was super disheartened with the message, honestly, that went out from TTEA because it was not balanced. I am a financial professional. If I made the decision based on those numbers, I would be fired. So I just encourage everyone to look at the larger picture. And Todd, I believe, will be presenting that to us later on. So thank you to everybody on our staff for all that you've done for our kids this year, every other year, and in the future. My fiduciary responsibility is to make sure that you have a job going forward. And if we're not fiscally responsible, that puts that at jeopardy. Thank you, Galen.
Thank you, Kim. Any other short comments? Okay, we will move on. We will move on to superintendent's report.
Thank you, Trustee Larson. I am going to present my screen now. Good evening, community. Good evening, staff. Good evening, families. I would like to present an update so far regarding our transition to 5 days of in-person instruction. As you well know, we have 5 guiding principles: health, safety, social, emotional wellness, access and equity, communication, and flexibility. What has happened to transition to in-person instruction 5 days this week so far? We have been redesigning our classrooms. As you well know, we have to follow the California Department of Public Health guidelines, and we have to keep our desks, our students' chairs, 4 feet apart, chair to chair. So our new desks are being assembled and reconfigured in many of our classrooms is underway. Also, our additional desk barriers, we need those to establish the 4 feet rule. We have 400 in stock and another 2,000 plus are scheduled to arrive. We are very hopeful that they will be here in time for our start date of March 29th, Monday, but it's cutting it very close. We are expecting them early next week, and we will keep you updated. Surveillance testing for students and staff, as you well know, is dependent on what tier we are in. Right now, Placer County is in the red tier. So at this time, we have no surveillance testing requirement. However, should we go back into purple, we have plans in place for surveillance testing for our students and staff. And as always, our symptomatic testing site, Right Out, is always open to our staff and our students. We have new bell schedules and new transportation routes. They've been created and finalized, and we will be sharing those with our families. We did so last week, and we'll be sharing again in our superintendent's parent newsletter tomorrow. And as Ms. DeLallo mentioned, we do negotiate the impacts of the working conditions regarding our schedules with our unions, both classified and certificated. And we have met with TTEA yesterday. We have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow and another one on the 25th, and we are very excited and looking forward to address our negotiations items regarding 5-day before we hit the March 29th transition date. Another addition is in-person graduation and promotion ceremonies for high school and for 8th graders. We submitted a proposal to our Placer County Department of Public Health Officer, Dr. Rob Oldham. We have been notified that he's going to hold our proposal along with other districts' proposal because CDPH is coming out with new guidelines for graduation any day now. So we're really excited about being able to plan and offer that. Again, it takes a village to do what we do for our students, and I also want to say and speak from the heart, we do value our TTUSD staff. We have always valued all of our employees, our classified, our certificated, our management. Everyone is important and has such a crucial role in educating our students. And above and beyond that, I wanted to highlight what we have done to support our TTUSD staff this year in this incredibly pandemic, crazy time. We have provided childcare, free childcare for all TTUSD staff during our hybrid instruction, and we will continue to provide childcare for 5-day in-person partial day to our TTUS staff at no cost to our employees. The district is taking on this expense. We also offered during distance learning, we offered the option for our teachers to work from home. We established and maintain a district COVID testing center at Right Out, not a Placer County testing center, but a district testing center where we are encumbering the cost of the staff there. We've also provided PPE equipment to all staff, N95, KN95, shields, surgical gloves, plastic barriers, hand sanitizers. We installed MERV 13 filters in all of our buildings. But in addition to that, we purchased air purifiers for every single classroom in our school district as an extra layer of mitigation. We started with high school, then we went to the middle schools, and now we're supplying them for our elementary classrooms. Additionally, we hired 8.2 FTE, which means eight teachers, FTE teachers, for distance learning at the elementary level, so our elementary teachers could focus on cohort A and cohort B students during hybrid instruction. We offered the same option to our middle and high school teachers, but they chose to take their distance learning students along with their cohorts A and B as part of their instructional day. We also provided 2 paid planning days for teachers to transition into hybrid instruction. We hired additional classified staff to support the school sites, campus monitors, and custodians. We also, during distance learning, repurposed our classified staff to help out at the school sites. For example, our bus drivers were helping at each of the school sites, doing whatever was needed to support our students, our teachers, our administrative staff. We even modified the instructional day on February 26 to accommodate any potential side effects that our staff may experience from the vaccine. And we thank our parent community for doing so. You pivoted with a few weeks' notice, and we so appreciate that. And then lastly, in partnership with that amazing hospital, Tahoe Forest, Nevada County, and Placer County Public Health, we hosted a TTUSD vaccine clinic in early and late February. And I can say very happily, because of these 3 organizations, 90% of our staff are vaccinated. And one representative from Tahoe Forest was standing with me February 26th, and we were chatting, and she said to me that we are possibly one of the first districts in the state of California to offer such a concerted effort of vaccines to our staff. We also provided 10 additional sick days to all staff, in addition to the 10 days they received under the FFCRA Act, with an option to extend for this year to June 30, 2021. So all of these items may not have a visible dollar sign attached to it, but we want to be able to acknowledge how hard our teachers are working, how difficult it has been for them, as well as our classified staff, our bus drivers, our food service personnel, who have been on the job since March, who have always been there. And we are so happy to be able to offer these items. But I think it's important that we want to publicly show how much we do value our staff and how much we do for them. So I just wanted to share that. And I wanted to give you an update. We're so excited about transitioning to 5-day, and I'll keep you posted regarding those plastic barriers that Todd and I are tracking. They're on a road freight truck right now as we speak. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Superintendent Geisel. Any questions from the board to Superintendent Geisel? Are there any public comments to this item, Mr. Hilton?
No public comments on this item.
Thank you. Then we'll move on to one of our favorite items, which is a school update. Superintendent Geisel?
Yes, thank you. We are very excited to be presenting a school showcase. It is not your typical site plan presentation, but we wanted to bring schools back into the limelight. And we have a principal, Mr. Greg Wollman, who's extremely passionate about his school and about his culture. And he is going to share with us virtually a showcase of Sierra High School. Mr. Wollman.
Good evening, everybody. Superintendent Geisel, can you give me a thumbs up update? You can see that, please.
We can see your screen, Mr. Wollman.
Thank you. Okay, school update for Sierra High School. As you are all know, we are also a model school in California. We've held that distinction for many years. So tonight is not just a report about COVID. We are going to talk about some celebrations. And yes, the pandemic is part of some of those situations that have gone on this year, obviously. But We're going to talk about some celebrations. So regardless of the struggles created by the pandemic, we do have celebrations, and we're just not going to focus all on COVID tonight. So as you all know, especially our board members out there, the literacy and the power of expectations that we have at Sierra High School, and we held true to our expectations for our literacy program here at Sierra High. Top shelf books are still available to our students this year, like any other. And our literature circle work that you're aware of, we continue to do. And each year we have students practicing and applying metacognitive thinking, academic conversations about reading process, and sharing their strategies within the classroom with their teachers and their fellow students, with always our ultimate end game, having an audience outside of school that our students can share their thinking and their reading experiences with, which many of you have taken part of over the years. We titled that our Breakfast and Books, and it's been gaining momentum each year, and our populations usually hang around about 60 to 75 people at times. So it's great. We're going to try to do it again this year. So this is where we have our students display their self-created presentation boards about one of the many books they've read throughout the year, and have conversations about their experiences with the book and with their reading and with their classmates. This year, pending COVID mitigations, we'll be holding our Breakfast and Books virtually, with people attending Google Meets with their students, or hosting here at Sierra High with scheduled rotations in our classrooms with mitigations set up. Our date for this event will be June 14th. More information to come in the next few months. So credit recovery, something that we've always done well here at Sierra High School. For those coming into our school, can make up some credits and then keep moving on towards success. So a year ago, we transitioned to online learning. This led us to creating courses in Google Classroom and creating a massive online materials. Those materials will be used in the near future to help us outline and fully prepare for more credit recovery options next year, and perhaps even next week. We have always had credit recovery materials and teaching strategies. However, the pandemic has led to a complete in-house design for online courses and how we can offer those. So when a student needs credit recovery in any course, we'll be prepared with updated materials, as our whole staff is fully proficient to teach online and in person. Not sure what the end result will be, as we're still compiling new resources every day, but I am confident the staff will be able to serve students even more efficiently in the future than before, and have many more options on the table next year for credit recovery for our incoming students. Student connections. Students who are not in class are receiving phone calls each day to either them and or their parents. When students don't answer, sometimes we call them 27 times back to back just to see what happens. Isn't technology grand? Additionally, Robin, the administrative assistant, and Ms. Lampley, our school counselor, have created a weekly schedule for each student to follow on their asynchronous days, from the beginning of their school day to the end. With that schedule, Robin or Ms. Lampley or other staff members are scheduled to meet with students for 30 to 60-minute periods to check in about academics, mental health, organization, and structuring their days, and trying to prioritize their work to do, and tutor them one-on-one in their school courses. We've also observed positive outcomes by calling many students to double check that they are on their way to school or on an online meet. This has helped reduce absenteeism, and students have voiced their comments that they are grateful for our protective hounding. So credit updates, parent connections, senior support. Twice each year, as you all know, once in the fall and the spring, we hold formal school meetings with individual scheduled times to meet with parents and students together with staff members to discuss academic progress, along with if there's behavior issues or behavior complements, which are more prominent now than ever, and post-graduation plans. This is still occurring, but completely virtual through Google Meets. Additionally, this year we've added a senior update in March, which we've just completed, to inform students and parents about the probability of reaching graduation or other plans moving into next year, whether we need a couple months next year to finish something, and or we're moving into college, and supports with that. So our seniors have scheduled meetings twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. to meet with our counselor, Miss Lampley, and the College and Career Tech, our new hire, Miss Heather Fissel. WASC, we are accredited. It does come up every year. We do get great questions about our diplomas and what our school standing is. We continue to score high marks with our WASC reports, and we have an accredited school. We have been an accredited school for over 20 years. Simply put, our students can be accepted at college and universities around the country if they choose to take the appropriate courses and do more than the minimum requirements for graduation. We recently completed a WASC review with the visiting community in January. Our results will be sent to us in May. There is a delay there, but hopefully we'll get them sooner than that. We are hoping to receive a 6-year clear accreditation like my school Coldstream Alternative did a few years ago, a rarity for alternative schools in California. So alternative accountability, do a little history here. What is that? To school board members, do you remember years ago when I asked your permission to go down the path of alternative accountability? It's a long time ago. Well, we're still on that path, and our accountability measures have come a long way since 2014. We removed ourselves from talking about the test scores of 2 or 4 or 7 or 5 juniors that may have enrolled a few months ago or a few days ago before state testing occurs, which never highlights the true strengths and areas needed for improvement at Sierra High, but instead the data supported learning that happened prior at other schools or other places. Now we focus on point of contact to the point of exit with students for accountability, for our accountability and for students for that matter. We do not have the luxury of having our students for an extended period of time, so we must be effective at all times with what we offer students and how we act and react to new situations and challenges coming to us. Our alternative accountability measures have been accepted by WASC, Model School, and by those at the state level of ACSA. When I presented our annual accountability plans to ACSA, the leadership attendees there continue to support our journey and wish that they had done what we have done here with their schools. Leaders continue to connect with me and ask for help to guide them down the right path for acceptance from their school boards, because they don't have that yet, and promoting alternative accountability to their own staff members. At Sierra High, the staff continues to look for more ways to be accountable for our strengths and weaknesses, and it's an ongoing process, daily, I will tell you that. Currently, we now have 3 to 5 years of data comparisons, which makes it more research sound, more viable, and a lot of comparisons from a multitude of data sets. And we continue to scrutinize those to make sure that we can push for school improvement based on our data. One interesting piece of data we have found during the pandemic is a comparison of semester 1 business math and English credits earned before versus the pandemic. And we were expecting this huge swing, right? But during semester 1 during the pandemic, our English credit earning only dropped by 2%, while business math dropped 23%. However, knowing that math has always been a struggle for our students for years, even before enrolling at Sierra High, learning math in person with direct instruction does have benefits. We also have data to show that the rate of credit earning for each student in math is much, much higher at Sierra High than what they did at previous schools, whether that was in district, out of district. And that is only viable if we maintain a rigorous learning environment here at Sierra High and holding students accountable to the state standards. And I can clearly state that we do hold them accountable to those standards. Another interesting data piece is 15% of our students completing the CTE emergency response course at Sierra High, and our graduates of TTUSD are currently working as firefighters. That does not seem like a high percentage of students, like, hey, it's only 15%. However, I believe that it is, as we have multiple choices of CTE courses in TTUSD to choose from, and to see students follow the training here all the way through with more training to career employment and beyond, much farther beyond high school is significant. Overall, we're still chasing students to attend school, and many reminders are sent out each day, just like any other day of the week or any other school year. At Sierra High this year, we call it the September effect. We still feel like we are just starting to build relationships with students, and many students are starting to fully engage in what they are capable of. To try to focus on more of our own school improvement, we started a book study a few weeks ago. The book is titled Visible Learning by John Hattie. Our staff had started this book study to try to figure out how to do more in the world of school improvement, but to use our data that we're collecting now and to look at all the data that was collected by John Hattie. And if you remember, the TTUSD leadership team dug into this book back in 2014. A big focus of the book is to talk about effect size in relation to teachers, schools, students, and parents and home life, and to make sure that we as a school aren't just assuming or think we know, but we want to look at the research to, especially for next year, what are we going to focus on to make sure that the items that we want to pursue are going to be in our accountability plans, WASC goals, and think about student scheduling, expectations. Is everything aligned with our actions and giving our students the very best opportunities for earning credits and achieving post-secondary goals? So we're doing a deep dive into that book chapter by chapter, and we are excited to see how that's going to change our accountability plans and our next steps for next year. Our last slide of the night, team, positions versus people. I've been alive for almost 50 years, and spending all of them here on Earth, I have noticed that positions are replaceable, but great people are not. We can hire as proficient as possible here at Sierra High, but Sierra High would simply not be what it is and do what it does for students without the team members that we have here today. All staff work beyond the job expectations of just the position. This is not something that I have to ask for, as they already bring that to work every day. It is truly amazing what can be accomplished with the staff here at Sierra High and gives us the power to look into the next level of school performance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Woolman. That was great.
Mr. Larson, I'd also like to note that, as you know, in January 2020, Mr. Woolman was awarded the AXA Placer County Principal of the Year Award, and he was going to the banquet on March 13th, that day, and the word came that across the nation, if not, of course, the state, that we were closing our schools for COVID-19 the evening of that award, that AXA was planning to announce more awards. Well, I don't know if you know that Mr. Woolman was also awarded Administrator of the Year, Region 2, for continuation educational options, and his work shows in his school. So I just wanted to make sure you knew that.
Do any of the board members have any questions for Mr. Womack or comments?
I just wanted to comment, Mr. Woolman, thank you so much for being sort of at the tip of the spear of your whole new approach towards accountability and evaluation. I know that you're being recognized for thinking outside the box and really not pinning all of your data to like a certain number of students, but individualized outcomes, which is really refreshing and very much needed, in particular with the student population that you serve. So it was really a pleasure to have that discussion with the evaluators on the WASC team, who were very curious about that methodology. So I just wanted to congratulate you on your ingenuity and your innovation around that, because I think a lot of other principals are going to find your leadership very helpful. So congratulations on that front.
Thank you, Kirsten.
I'd like just to thank Greg for coming back on the public screen, because we've missed you. So thank you for being the first one back on. And I know we've, as a board, have been bugging Carmen to get you guys back on. And I appreciate you with all the other things that are on your plate right now. But I do want to also, just in the same vein as Kirsten, the creativity that you experienced at your school site is something that I think all of our teachers and principals are now trying to figure out how to do. And so you may be a role model in more ways than one, because I think most of your techniques and your style of collecting all of your children is something that is so new to all of us right now, but it's something that you've mastered. And I applaud you to share all your thoughts, because I think it's it is creative and it is intuitive, but to get all those awards and all of those results that are positive from all your students, I think something's going right. So I'm really psyched, and I'm glad you were first on.
Thank you, Dee Dee. Anyone else? Yes, Kim.
Sorry. Greg, thank you for warming my heart, as usual.
Mr. Woolman, I just want to echo what you said about positions versus people. A couple of months ago, I went with Ms. Simpson to your school, and while we were waiting for you, the purpose of the visit was to see all the mitigation for COVID for the kids and the teachers. I I witnessed your school secretary, Ms. Redmond, who's amazing, on the phone with a student, helping him with homework, and the way she was helping was posing questions to get from him to think deeper, and so he could use that thinking and apply it to whatever paper he was working on. But it was just a level of commitment that was so natural for her and in the environment that you provide for your staff and your students. And yeah, yay. Love us some Sierra High. Welcome back. Can't wait to see everybody.
Thank you, Chris. Were there any public comments?
No public comments on this item. Greg wanted to say something.
Yes, Greg.
Thank you. And just, I want to underscore the idea that Robin Redmond would be the perfect example of the last slide that I showed, that it's not just answering the phone and putting out some lunch and then she goes back to answer the phone. It is not that. We cannot do what we do here and go to the next step without people like her. And I could go down the list of everybody on the staff like that. And when we talk about data dives, yes, some things may be my idea in the beginning, but ideas come from staff now that we've created that space to talk and think about it. It's not an exaggeration to say it's a weekly basis of, hey, what if, and it comes from a different staff member all the time. What if we tracked this? What if we looked into this? And then we dig apart and it's like, no, that's not going to work. Yep, it's going to work. And we just go back and forth. And sometimes we collect it for years, and then we decide it's not viable anymore. And we go on to another graph or a chart. But now we have things that have been lasting for 4 or 5, coming into the 6th year to try to prove longevity and mathematical viability, I think is the term. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. So now we move on to facilities. We have a couple of contracts to award.
Yes, we do, Trustee Larson. We have several contracts to award, the first one being regarding Kings Beach and the roof contract. And Mr. Rivera is going to speak about this in detail.
Thank you. And if you don't mind, I'll address both 11.1 and 11.2 since they are related. In recent years, we have been dividing our major re-roofing projects into 2 components. One is the actual materials side, where we're actually procuring the roofing materials that will be installed separately. The district procures those through a state contract called CMAS. And we've been using Garland as our preferred vendor for that. And there's multiple reasons for it, but to sum it up, basically it's the pricing of it, it's the quality of the products, and it's also the extent of the warranty and services that are associated with Garland products. They also provide some inspection services as well as annual maintenance inspections as well. So that is 11.2, actually. I'm a little out of order. The other item, 11.1, is for the actual labor of installation, so the actual tear off of the existing roof and the installation of the Garland materials. So this project is associated with re-roofing the existing or older building of Kings Beach Elementary, which was not included in the original bond modernization and reconstruction plans. At the time of the bond planning, the roof on that particular building still had a useful life of over 10 years. And then the winter of 2016 happened and created a lot of extensive damage on the roof. So they've been having problems the last couple of years that we've been patching up. Now it's time to actually move forward and replace that. So the first contract is for Barth Roofing, who were the low bidder on the bid for this project in the amount of $552,518. And that is going to be coming from the certificate of participation funds that we issued last year. The second item, 11.2, is for Garland Roof Materials, and that is in the amount of $497,604. So combined, this roofing project is going to be approximately $1,052,000.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. So let's take these one at a time for the board. Does the board have any questions of Mr. Rivera on 11.1, which is the labor part of the roof? Are there any questions from the public?
No public comment on this item.
Could I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve 11.2. Sorry, 11.1, 20.2.
I'll second.
Question?
Member Levan?
Aye.
Member Hennessy?
Aye.
Member Driller?
Aye.
President Sorek?
Yes.
Clerk Larson?
Yes.
Thank you.
Do any of the board members have any questions on the material contract?
Not necessarily a question, just more of a clarification. Todd, you mentioned that this that we're doing to Kings Beach Elementary School was not in the Measure E fund at all. So this is basically coming out of our facilities budget, our normal budget without Measure E, correct?
Yes, it's coming from remaining certificate of participation funds that were left over.
Yep, okay. And so we had planned for this at some point, but a little bit sooner than we thought. Okay, cool, thank you.
Any other questions? Any public comments?
No public comment on this item.
Can I have a motion to pass this material?
I'll make a motion to approve 11.2.
I'll second.
Member Levac?
Aye.
Member Hennessy?
Aye.
Member Driller?
Aye.
President Sorek?
Yes.
Clerk Larson?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll go into the exciting and interesting fiscal services, starting with the just awesome audit report. And I'll have to say, this has been several in a year, Todd, and I think they started with you.
Yes. So Mr. Rivera is going to discuss our audit report. And by December 15th, as you all know, we have to have an audit filed for the preceding year. So with the details of that, Mr. Todd Rivera.
Right, thank you. So this has been long awaited for. I'm always excited about this because this is officially our closeout of the prior fiscal year. So after this item is approved, hopefully it'll be officially the close of 2019-20. So looking forward to that. This is normally something we would present prior to January 31st as required by government code. However, because of the pandemic, they did extend the timeline to the end of March, and that's why we're bringing it to you a little bit later this year. The audit not only includes financial statements and just shows what the current fiscal position of the district is as far as assets and liabilities, but also there's a huge compliance component to it as well to make sure that we're complying with state and federal laws with regards to how we spend funds, but also that we're meeting all of the requirements of education code and government code as far as instructional minutes and other things that we're doing within the district that are mandated by the state. So with that, I'm going to introduce Elizabeth Sav, who is our auditor from Crow, and she's going to provide some additional details on this year's audit, or last year's audit.
Hello. Can you all hear me, hopefully? Good. Okay. I believe I have the ability to present my screen, so I'm going to present the reports and walk through them. And yes, I just want to echo what Todd said. There was an extension to March 31st for all K-12 districts in California. So our busy season just kind of continued on forever. So here we are at the tail end, getting ready to present this, and we are all ready to move on to 2021's audit, which will be starting quickly in May. So let me see here. Screen one. Okay. Can you see the report?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Google Meet looks a little bit different than Zoom, so it's always, you want to make sure. All right. So
maybe if you could zoom in just a little bit more on that. Just take up the whole. There you go. Perfect.
yeah. Okay. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to walk you through. I have several reports here because I know you also have the bond audits as well that we want to just briefly go through, but let's spend a little bit more time first on the district audit. So like Todd said, we do perform an audit over not only your financial statements, but over your state compliance and your federal compliance. So let's just start with the financial statement. So this is the independent auditor's report, or our opinion over your financial statements. Talks about management's responsibility. So this entire report of 93 pages is really your management's responsibility. We do assist in putting it together because it is a lot of information, but all of the information comes directly from your management team. Our responsibility is to conduct audit tests over your various areas and then express an opinion on it. So here you can see our paragraph for opinion says, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the governmental activities, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information of Tahoe Truckee for June 30, 2020. The remainder, let me just emphasize, that's an unmodified opinion. So anytime you receive an audit, that's the type of opinion you would want to receive. Essentially saying that we're not going to modify it. We didn't have any major exceptions. From all of our tests, everything was clean. Other matters, this talks about the required supplementary information and supplementary information that is required to be included. Following that opinion, you have management's discussion and analysis. So anytime you have a governmental entity, this is a required component of the financials, and it's a really nice spot to go to that just puts more in layman's terms how to read the report, what were the actual happenings of the year, because the financial statements don't necessarily speak to all of those changes, but this will give you some idea of like financial highlights, etc., and also financial position moving forward and outlook into the next fiscal year. Okay, and then your actual financial statements start on page 20. So here's your statement of net position. So this looks a little bit different than what you typically look at when you get your first and second interim reports, as well as the unaudited actuals. This is taking all of the governmental activities, all of your funds, and smushing them all together. And it's also adding on your capital assets, any deferred outflows of resources. This is typically related to your pensions and your OPEBs. And then your liabilities, so your long-term liabilities, you can see these large numbers being put onto the books. That mostly is related to either your GO bonds, your certificates of participation, and then your pensions and your OPEB liabilities. So you don't see those on your fund financials, but this particular financial statement will show you all of that information as of that June 30 date. When you come down here and you look at your net position overall, so this is for the district overall, you can see you have a positive net position, but of course, as any reader would look, they'd be a little bit alarmed by this negative 52 million of unrestricted net position. So you've got about 79 million net of your assets are tied up in capital assets, Then you have these different portions that are restricted for very specific purposes. And so you end up with a negative. And that could be alarming. But this is an extremely common picture for all governmental entities across the United States. And that came when GASB 68 and GASB 75 came out, requiring entities to put the full pension liabilities that were out there relating to their employees, as well as the OPEB. So this looks very upside down. But again, I want to assure you that this is actually very common. And not to be alarmed. This is not something that you're basically going under. This is just because of those large pension liabilities. So we spend a little bit more time. This is your income statement for government-wide. It looks a little interesting. It's all by function. But then we get down here, and this is what's going to look a little bit more familiar. By your funds. These are your major funds, and then your non-major funds. So we want to focus more on these individual activities and where their ending fund balances are from that position. Okay, so and one more thing I want to mention about this, when we talk about major funds and non-major funds, there are certain calculations we have to go through to determine what's a major fund, what's a non-major fund. And what point of interest that would be up to the board and to the public is we do an audit and we have a materiality calculation. We have a different materiality calculation for each one of these columns. So each one of these columns is receiving their own separate mini audit, if you will, to make sure that we are giving an opinion on the materiality reasonableness for each one of these. So we don't apply one materiality across all, because obviously something over here would be more, would have a higher materiality threshold than maybe the non-major funds. So just something to keep in mind as we do our audits. It is a very extensive process, and we do have separate calculations for all of those. And then for those of you who are very seasoned board members, you know that you want to just skip right down to the very end of the report, and it gives you a nice summary of the auditor's results. So like we mentioned, the financial statements were unmodified opinion, which is exactly what you'd like to see. In addition to that, we had no material weaknesses identified and no significant deficiencies identified. And no non-compliance materials to the financial statements was noted. So a very, very clean audit. Federal awards, we are required to do an audit over your federal dollars. Again, no material weaknesses were identified and no significant deficiencies. The type of report or opinion, if you will, that we issued is unmodified. Again, that's exactly what you would like to see. And then the program that we audited this year was the National School Lunch Program. Often questions we get about this particular area of the audit is, how did you select what program you tested or how many programs you tested? We do not have the ability to just pick and choose what we want to audit. The federal government is very specific in how we determine what is a major program and what is not. So it's based off of the amount of dollars that are spent on that program, and it's also based upon how often it's been audited. So your large programs, which is anything over $750, were required to be audited at least every 3 years. So there's often a rotation you see here. And then the auditee is qualified as a low-risk auditee. That's another common question we get. What does that mean? It means that you've had clean audits for the last couple of years, and you filed certain forms with the federal government timely, so therefore you're low risk. And that means that we're required to have at least 20% coverage of your total federal expenditures as far as what's audited. If you were considered not low risk, we would have to make sure we audited at least 40% of your expenditures. So a much more extensive process. And then the state awards is unmodified. So like Todd mentioned, we not only do financial statements in federal, we also have to look at your state compliance requirements. That is dictated by, the California Department of Education. This is your state laws and regulations opinion. So this is the state compliance opinion. These are all of the areas that we are required to look at as auditors. We don't get to pick and choose what areas we look at in the current year. It's quite a lengthy list. So if it says no, see below, there's an explanation as to why we didn't perform procedures. Basically, it doesn't apply to Tahoe Truckee Unified. And so if it says yes, we did perform procedures. And I like to demonstrate this to boards and to the public so they can see the laundry list of areas that we look at for state compliance. And the fact that you received an unmodified opinion essentially means that the entire district, your teachers, your attendance clerks, your facilities people submitting the forms for facilities, comprehensive safety plans, everybody, it's not just the business office, it's the entire district, has to do their jobs in order to get a clean, unmodified report, because the state does not allow for materiality in the state compliance audit. So if we were to find one item, one signature, one absent note that was selected and not reported appropriately, or something dated incorrectly, that would automatically qualify this report, and we would have to report a finding. Even if it didn't have a fiscal impact, we would still have to report it. So the fact that you have an unmodified opinion means that your entire district worked together and we didn't find any errors in that process. So, job well done for sure. And then you can see the rest of it. We have no matters to report as far as findings go. So again, very clean report. Your team always does a great job being responsive to our questions and our requests. And this last year was definitely exciting and interesting. We had to perform all of our site visits virtually. Your teachers, your ASB clerks, everybody was very accommodating to work with us over Zoom. We did not compromise on the level of detail and the level of supporting documentation we require. We have very strict professional standards. So we didn't compromise on the quality of our audit. We just all had to modify into this remote environment, and your team did a great job working with us in that process. Any questions on the financial district audit that I could answer?
Any questions from the board members? Kim?
This is a leading question. It's kind of bragging on our staff, but how often see this type of clean report like this?
I couldn't really give you statistics, but it's not often. When I have specific, especially, we talk about here material weaknesses and significant deficiencies. Those are the deficiencies that are required to be reported to those charged with governance. But you could also have just a deficiency, if you will. There's like 3 different levels. But your management team has always taken the approach of, whatever deficiencies are noted, we'll report them, even if it's not required. And we had nothing to report. So it is not super common to have that clean of an opinion, especially when it comes to the state awards, because that's not centralized in the business office. That's very decentralized. That's all, like I said, that's your facilities, your teachers, everybody working together to make sure they're following all the rules, even if they don't make sense. There are, certain rules that the state requires that could cost you money if you don't do it right. So it is not super common to have a report this clean. So it is something to commend your team.
Great question, Kim. See, Todd, you're rare.
Well, as Elizabeth says, it really is a concerted team effort. I mean, every department has their hands in this and providing information and making sure their compliance, from food service to Ed's department and technology to Jeff's. All the school sites do an amazing job on just following the controls and protocols and processes we have in place, and especially the fiscal services department as well. So I congratulate everybody, and it was a great job, and I'm really happy to be working with such people that do their job properly and correctly, and thank you.
Super. Any other questions? Are there any public comments?
No public comments on this item.
We need to approve this awesome audit report.
I just also wanted to compliment Todd and his team, every single, team supervisor and lead who was in charge and held accountable to making sure that all of the requirements were fulfilled, and that everybody knows, I think I speak on behalf of the board, that we are so appreciative of the school district continually, year after year, having an unmodified audit is really an impressive outcome, and it's not to be underrated. It's just absolutely incredible. So thank you to everyone. Even if we had a hard time this year, it's good to know that everybody still was able to dot their I's and cross their T's, despite, I'm sure, 500 times more work than they're used to. So thank you to everyone, and my compliments to your dedication to making sure our district is clean. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. And can I have a motion?
I will second Kirsten's comments, and I will make a motion to approve the audit report for 1920.
Thank you, Dee Dee, and with that, I'll second.
Member Levant?
Aye.
Member Hennessy?
Aye.
Member Driller?
Aye.
President Zurek?
Yes.
Clerk Larson?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. And now we'll move on to Measure E audit, and then Measure U audit.
Great, thank you. I'll just talk about both those items. So as you know, our Measure E and Measure U bonds, general obligation bonds, are what are called Proposition 39 bonds, which they require a lower threshold of voter approval of 55%. However, there's some other requirements associated with those bonds, one being having a Citizens Oversight Committee that basically retrospectively reviews expenditures and ensures that we're complying with what we promise voters, but also an external audit that we have to do annually. And that's what our external auditors, Crow, Elizabeth, have done here. So there's two components to this. One is the financial statements showing basically the ins and outs, the revenues, the expenditures, and the fund balance. And then the other is the compliance audit, what we call the Prop 39 audit, to ensure that what we're spending the money on is related to what was in the ballot language when we went out to voters. And with that, I'll let Elizabeth just touch on some of the highlights.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. So I'll go through Measure E first, and then Measure U I'll fly through and then answer questions because they're very similar. You can see the financial statements are much shorter. It's only 14 pages. Again, if we go down to the independent auditor's report, it looks very similar, just a little bit shorter. And we do have our opinion paragraph here saying that, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the financial position of Measure E's GO bonds. And there's an emphasis of a matter paragraph here that's just reminding the reader that this is not the district as a whole. Again, this is only Measure E GO bonds that we're giving an opinion on. And then further down here, you can see the assets and the liabilities is all zeroed out. The monies have been expended. So this will be the final portion of that measure. And then you can see here your revenues that came in for that year and your expenditures and what they break out into as far as the type of expenditure that we provided audit procedures over. So total expenditures of about 9.2 million. So just keep that dollar amount in the back of your mind when we move over to the performance audit. But again, a very clean audit. We had no findings to report. So the notes to the financials just provide background, further information about how things are accounted for. But again, a very clean report. Then we go over to the performance audit, and this is usually where most of the interest lies. Is, did the district spend the money on what they said they were going to spend the money on, what the voters approved? So it's a different type of report. So let's go to the independent auditor's report. It looks much different than the financial statements as far as the verbiage. It's following specific articles from the California Constitution. And the procedures that we perform are in line with what the California Audit Guide has dictated for us to follow. And here's the results. Instead of an opinion, if you will, it's a results paragraph. The results of our procedures indicated that in all significant respects, Tahoe Truckee expended Measure E GO bond funds for the year June 30, 2020, only for the specific projects developed by the Measure E Oversight Committee and Board of Trustees and approved by the voters. Further down here, it's going to give you the background legislative history, and it also provides the actual ballot language that existed and the bond project list. And so this is what we provide to our staff as they're performing the procedures, that they are to check the expenditures back to these listings here to make sure that things are being spent appropriately. So, for example, if there's only 2 sites that are covered under this Measure E, we would want them to make sure that there weren't expenditures that were spent on other sites that are not included in the ballot language, that kind of thing. And then down here on the last page, page 6, it shows the objectives, our scope. So here's that $9.2 million total expenditures for Measure E that was subjected to testing. And down here, you'll see that we specifically selected 25 non-payroll expenditures and 12 payroll-related expenditures. And we achieved about 45% coverage of your total expenditures, which is pretty high. I mean, you want to see at least 20% coverage when you're looking at these performance audits. So 45% that we specifically tested is a good amount of coverage. The payroll-related expenditures, it's a little bit smaller dollar because it's payroll, but we do perform very specific procedures over payroll because we want to make sure that bond dollars are being spent only on qualifying payroll. So the district is required to give us, time sheets, time tracking, and really back up why those payroll dollars are allowed. So again, we found no issues with the way the funds were spent. On the salaries as well as on the construction and renovation expenditures. And then I'll move over to Measure U. It's going to look very similar, except for there's still money sitting in Measure U this year. So again, here's our financial statement opinion. Here's our opinion paragraph indicating it's an unmodified opinion once again. We had no deficiencies noted. So here's your ending assets and ending fund balance as of June 30, 2020. At a point in time. I'm sure it doesn't look like that anymore. And then here's your income statement showing money coming in and then the total dollars going out. So a lot of activity going on over here, about $39.5 million in expenditures. And then over on the performance audit for Measure U, again, you can see that the results paragraph indicates that in all significant respects, Measure U bond funds for the year June 30, 2020 were only spent on specific projects developed by Measure U's Oversight Committee, the Board of Trustees, and approved by the voters. So it's what you would want to see at the end of this process. Similar to Measure E, it's including the actual ballot language, the actual project lists, and the sites. And then the last page is going to show you, here's that $39.5 million in total expenditures, and then this is how much we specifically tested. So we had 38 non-payroll expenditures, totaling $24 million, or 61% coverage of your total expenditures, and then 25 payroll expenditures that we tested, about $150,000, ensuring that they were in line and properly supported. So great results. Any questions on those reports?
Any questions from the board members? It was very nostalgic reading over the, the bond measure and the projects. So are there any public comments?
Not on this item.
Any comments from the board before we have a motion?
No, I just can't believe we're there.
Yeah. Do we have a motion?
With that.
Let's start with Measure E.
Correct. So I'll do a motion to approve 11.4 Measure E, performance audit.
I'll second.
Member Levi?
Aye.
Member Hennessy?
Aye.
Member Driller?
Aye.
President Surek?
Yes.
Clerk Larson?
Yes.
Thank you.
We have a motion to accept the annual report for Measure U.
I will make a motion to approve 11.5 Measure U's annual performance audit.
I'll second.
Member Levi?
Aye.
Member Hennessy?
Aye.
Member Driller?
Aye.
President Surek?
Yes.
Clerk Larson?
Yes.
Thank you.
And now we move on to the second interim report. I hope our teachers have hung on this long. This is a pretty interesting report.
Yes, Trustee Larson. Mr. Rivera is going to introduce and talk through our second interim report.
Thank you. And I'd also like to add thank you to Elizabeth for presenting those audit reports. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
You just bear with me while I present. Okay, thank you very much. So tonight we present the second interim report for the 2020-21 fiscal year. And just as a little bit of review here, so we're required to do 2 interim reports throughout the year. The first we presented to the board in December, and that was basically changes to our budget that had occurred from budget adoption through October 31st. The second interim officially takes us through changes through January 31st, although there are some changes that kind of extend into February through the end of February as well. If we have knowledge, we will make those adjustments as well. So really what I'm going to cover tonight is major changes to the revenues and expenditures since we last reported to the board. I know the material in the report is presented as the changes since budget adoption. However, a lot of those things we've already covered at first interim, so I'll be focusing more on the changes that have occurred since the last interim report to the second interim. And just an overview again of the budget reporting process. Finally, we finished the audit for last year, and now we're on second interim report. Moving forward, obviously, is just budget planning for the 21-22 school year and the local control accountability plan that is associated with that. So a lot of work's going to be taking place over the next few months on just developing and building the budget for next year. So some of the major changes that have happened since budget adoption We covered a lot of things at first interim, as I mentioned, but since then, the governor has released his January budget proposal. There was not many things that impacted us as far as just the normal day-to-day funding. He did add COLA for something that will really support and help the LCFF districts out there. Doesn't really affect us too much, just a couple of different funding sources are affected by that. The other piece that he had included in his January budget proposal was the $4.6 billion that was associated with some additional funding for learning loss mitigation. However, that is a budget proposal. There's some other information I'm going to share later on the presentation that's associated with that and how that impacts our district. But mostly we're just refining the budget, doing cleanup. We're taking accounts of just any savings we might have this year, making changes to the budget if we have vacant positions and what those savings associated with that are. And also any revenue changes that have occurred since the last interim report. So looking forward on the revenue changes, as I mentioned before, our overall increase to revenues since budget adoption is approximately $5.7 million. I talked before that we covered a lot of this at first interim, which you can see here. At first interim, we had shown an increase of $4.05 million, and that was a combination of our property tax increase. At budget development, we had anticipated a 3.92% property tax increase. It came in just under 5.2%. We also got good news that there wouldn't be reductions to our state aid. We had increased our state aid by $190,000, which we had taken out at the adopted budget. And then in relation, there was not a reduction to our Sierra Expeditionary Learning Charter School. In lieu reduction, we had anticipated a savings there of $132,000 that got put back in. With the changes with the actual approved budget with the state. The big change here that we saw was the CARES Act money in the state learning loss mitigation funds, which amounted to over $2.3 million. And that was to be used for very specific purposes as it related to COVID mitigation and also learning loss mitigation, additional supports, and I'll go into that a little bit later. And then we did receive some positive news on our federal programs with Title I being increased, and it's been a long time coming. We've had reductions to Title I year over year. This year we saw an increase to all our title programs of $209,000. And just to remind you, those programs are very restrictive in nature, and they're required to be used for supplemental services outside of our normal operations. So moving on to second interim. Some of the changes that are noted here as far as revenue are concerned is we had a reduction to our COP debt service contribution. And if you recall, every year we contribute or we budget for $250,000 towards our certificates of participation debt service. And what happens is our developer fees are the primary source for funding that debt service. If we do collect enough developer fees to cover the annual debt service, then this $250,000 drops out and we don't spend it. So at this point in the year, we've already collected enough to fully cover debt service for COPs. So I've removed that from the budget, which has an effect of increasing our revenue. We also had a nice surprise very recently that our special education funding would be increased by $188,000. If you do recall at first interim, we actually had projections that showed we were going to get a reduction of $100,000 plus. So we actually reduced our revenue at first interim. Now we're back up there. So we're anticipating receiving this. We've included it in the out years as well. So hopefully it materializes. It will change slightly throughout the rest of the year as far as the projections are concerned. And this special education local area planner, the one who allocates and distributes that funding and determines what the amounts are for each district. Another big one is our additional ESSER 2 funds, and that's CARES Act-related money through the federal government. We received ESSER 1 last year, or this year rather, and then they allocated an additional funding for K-12 districts. So with that, we have confirmation. We actually received some funding through this, $1.2 million. If you recall, our COVID expenditures at first interim had actually overextended the revenue sources that we were receiving. So this basically offsets that for us. So this again is for COVID-related expenditures and mitigation measures and additional staffing support. And another one I wanted to just highlight here, reduction of $100,000 in interest earnings. And this is just a reflection of what our county treasury pool is doing as far as interest earnings, and they've always done pretty well. They, in comparison to the outside market, our earnings for interest have been abysmal this year. They're well under 1% interest earnings, so I've reduced that. Normally we budget about $173,000 in interest earnings. It looks like we might only get about 60 to 70, so I have reduced that, and we put it back in the next year, assuming that things will be better. So this is just a graph showing the actual changes from adopted budget first interim and then the second interim. So you see the $1 million increase for property taxes, state aid and such, which includes all of our property tax increases. It includes the COP money that we put back in the revenue, and also includes some of the additional special ed money. Federal revenue and state revenue, as I mentioned before, a large portion of those increases are from federal COVID relief funds, as well as state COVID and learning loss mitigation funding, in addition to some carryover from state programs and also the increases to the title programs. And our usual snapshot graph of our revenue summary. This has changed a little bit. Normally our property taxes, state aid, and EPA are about 75%, so they've gone down a little bit in relation because we did receive all this additional one-time money from the CARES Act funding. Now moving on to expenditures. Our overall expenditures have increased since the adopted budget by $3.68 million. At first interim, we had identified an increase of 4.05. So we've actually gone down in our overall expenditures, and I'll explain why. But at first interim, we had added positions that we had added post-budget adoption, non-COVID related and COVID related positions related to additional supports for school sites as well as departments. We have the regular COVID expenditures for material supplies, for safety mitigation, and everything else we've done with COVID over the last several months. We had some increases from carryover of programs as well as local grants and donations, some capital outlay increases. Primarily, we have an E-rate project, so that increased things a little bit. That was for wireless access points and new switches, network switches, which really supported our distance learning program. And then we saw some increases to our food service contribution, and that was based off of a loss in participation, essentially, from students. We were seeing some pretty significant reductions in our revenues from the feds in the state through the school nutrition program, just because the number of meal counts were down. So we had increased our contribution by about $300,000 at first interim. And then we also had some vacancy savings at first interim as well. So moving on to second interim, we've seen some decreases since then. We had $138,000 decrease since first interim in certificated salaries. A lot of this was due to a couple of vacant positions. We had some mid-year retirements, so we saw some savings there. And then I've also adjusted our certificated sub-budgets by about $60,000, and that's just because we have not been using our sub-budgets how we normally would. In addition, a lot of the sub-costs that we are incurring are going to these learning loss and CARES Act funding as opposed to the unrestricted general fund. So we have reduced that for this year by about $60,000. Our classified staffing has reduced by $354,000, and mind that this is just since first interim. So this is a period of about 3 or 4 months since the last time we reported to you. And a lot of this is because we have very significant vacancies that we just have not been able to fill this year. I think it's just a sign of the times in the pandemic itself. People aren't applying to these jobs. But we do experience savings as a result. However, we do need these positions, so it's kind of a bittersweet, I guess you could call it. So we have seen savings and vacancies for special ed IAs. Right now, currently, we have between 10 and 12 positions that are vacant. We have vacancies in the custodial ranks. We have 4 to 7 bus drivers vacancies right now that we haven't been able to fill. All these things really amount to quite substantial savings, even over a three-month period. In addition, I went through the budget and I did reduce some extra duty budgets for classified staff as well as overtime and substitutes for custodians. And as I said before, a lot of that type of stuff right now is being funded from these COVID funds that we have on the restricted side of the budget. So we're able to see some savings due to that. And then the decrease in benefits is just a result of these decreases in certificated and classified salaries. It trickles down with the savings in payroll liabilities, but also the savings in health and welfare benefits. Most of those positions that we're seeing vacancies on qualify for district contribution to health care benefits. So that can be substantial. Moving on to books and supplies, we saw an increase to our books and supplies of $352,000. We did add about $200,000 in COVID-related supplies, particularly the additional desk shields that we're ordering, along with air purifiers and some other items. We saw some increases because of just local donations that are specified for a very specific purpose. These are items that usually go to the classroom or the school site directly, and they spend as they've been awarded according to what the donor wants. And then we have a lot of reclassifications of expenditures, and this happens all the time where money is moved from one expenditure accounting classification to another. For example, you might have a case where you had the maintenance budget where originally we put a budget amount in under repairs, which would fall under professional services. However, they decided they're doing more in-house work, so they move it to materials and supplies. So it's pretty common, and sometimes those numbers can be pretty substantial. Moving on to operating expenditures. I did take a look at what our budgets were for things like operations and snow removal. Obviously, at this point in the year, we felt pretty comfortable reducing that, so I reduced it by $68,000. And then we had some increases as well. We have an increase to our community school bill back. Placer County Office of Ed currently runs the local community school here. However, they charge us back for any excess costs over what revenue they receive. So based on the prior year billing, we needed to increase by about $75,000, and we probably should have done that first interim, but we've accounted for it now. And then we did receive an increase to our liability insurance of $52,000, and this is related to Assembly Bill 218, which essentially extended the timeline and look-back period for persons wanting to file sexual abuse claims against a school district. So what that has done in the liability arena of insurance is it's caused a lot of just concern and potential high dollar case projections. So what they're doing now to account for that is they're billing all of the members of our insurance group a prorated amount of money that will help hopefully cover future claims costs related to this. And then we did have some increases to legal and audit services, as well as our telephone, and of course the accounting reclassifications that we see that we're changing from one account to another. On the other financing side, we saw a reduction of $119,000. This is related to the increased food service funding that I mentioned that we got with the revenues, and what that was the school nutrition program. The federal government authorized some additional funding, 75 cents a meal, for school districts from last year because of revenue loss. So that amount for us was about $123,000, which essentially offset our food service contribution. And just a snapshot of our expenditures and the increases there, showing the total $3.6 million increase. So expenditure summary, we're still looking at about 80% of our expenditures are related to staffing and benefits. And then how does this all affect the unrestricted fund balance? And the unrestricted fund balance is really what we look at for our financial strength in the district. It's essentially the unrestricted side of our fund is what we have flexibility with, what is what we have a reserve in. So this is really what I look at for our financial position. We had an increase to our fund balance of $1.975 million, so pretty significant. There's reasons behind it, which I'll go over in a second. But this is up from an increase to our fund balance of $80,000 that we reported at first interim in there. So a lot of good reasons why this occurred. All of it is really considered one-time savings for us. So our second interim reserve for economic uncertainty is $10.4 million. It was 8.5 at first interim. Right now, that translates to a 13.91% reserve for economic uncertainty. So how did it increase? Well, some of those changes I mentioned with the budget, with vacancy savings and some other savings, all contributed to this. This chart right here, this table, basically represents all the increases and decreases to the fund balance. So anything that added to the fund balance is a positive number, whether it's a reduction in expenditures or an increase in revenue. Anything that's a negative number takes away from the increase in fund balance. So looking at this, I'm not going to go over every line item, but the decrease in contributions to COPs, which I mentioned before, we took that out. That added $250,000 automatically to the bottom line. Our increase in special education funding added $188,000 in new revenue, which in turn reduced our contribution from special ed, from the unrestricted general fund to the special ed funds by $188,000. That adds to the bottom line. Reduction in interest actually takes away from the fund balance, $100,000. And then we had all these vacancy savings. So we had vacancy savings in our EL program. We had increase in Title I, so we were able to shift some staff salaries over to the Title I side on the restricted side. We had a vacant coach. We have vacant enhancement paraprofessionals. Our transportation vacancy savings, and this is just between first and second interim, 4 to 7 bus drivers, amounts to $90,000 in a 3-month period. We had a vacancy savings with our special ed IAs of $244,000. And that represents those 10 to 12 IAs I mentioned before. I reduced the snow removal budget by $68,000. That's savings. I decreased our certificated subs by $55,000, our custodial subs by 12, our overtime for custodians by 44. And then I have the ads in here too. And if you look over the right-hand column, you'll see where I designated whether this is something that is an ongoing savings or if it's something that I have to add back in the budget. And all of these things that are related to vacancy savings, we have to put back in the budget next year. It's something, they're authorized positions. We always budget assuming that those positions would be filled. If it wasn't COVID right now, I think we'd have a lot more filled than we do. We always experience some vacancy savings, but never of this magnitude. So these, all the things that are marked yes, will be added back in the budget next year. So the total of that is just under $1.9 million. So looking at the fund balance here, what we're looking at is a $10.4 million reserve amounting to about 13.91%. You'll see the instructional materials reserve is at 1.4 million. That includes our reserves associated with textbook adoptions as well as technology replacement, our bus replacement, and also our Medi-Cal administrative activities. So moving on, just taking a look at the multi-year projections here and what the assumptions are. And this is important because I really want to highlight, when we're looking at our budget, we're not just looking at the current year, we're looking at 3 years, and even I look at 4 years. I look at one more year out and trying to determine what our financial condition is for the district on an ongoing basis. So looking at our major assumptions, and I won't cover every single one of these, but our property taxes are our biggest revenue source by far. Our projections right now for 2021-22 are a 3.25% property tax increase next year, followed by in the following year by a 3% property tax increase. And I know we have experienced some larger increases in more recent years. However, there's a lot of unknowns right now as far as property tax and assessed value in our area. The Board of Equalization, who determines kind of the base increase to property taxes every year, has established only a 1% increase that assessors, and let me explain that. There's 3 components to determining the assessed value within a community. The first thing is this automatic increase that the Board of Equalization authorizes for assessors. Essentially, Proposition 13 says that any existing property cannot be increased by more than 2% annually for their assessed value. That later translates into what their property tax bill will be. So every year, the authority that authorizes up to 2% that assessors can increase existing properties is the Board of Equalization. And they base this authorization off of what the CPI index is for the state of California. So based on the timeline that they're looking at, they've only authorized assessors to increase by about 1% on existing properties. So that's down from this current fiscal year where they authorized the full 2%. So right off the bat, we're at a disadvantage of 1%. And I would say more often than not, you will see that 2% increase. So this is more unique that we would have less than that. In addition, the other components that add to our property tax increase are new development and when that's assessed, because any new construction, there's a lag time from when they start construction to when it actually shows up as a higher value on the tax rolls. And then the third component is housing turnover. So that's when you have an existing house that is sold, may be valued on the tax rolls at, let's say, $400,000. Someone comes around and pays $750,000 for it. That new value, that variance, that $350,000 difference is added on the tax rolls now. So that's the increase. So all those things come into play when we're assessing what our property taxes will look like. So 3.25 is, I guess, optimistically conservative. It's not a small amount by any means when you look at that the Board of Equalization determination is the base. So anything in addition to that, really, we need to have significant turnover and development with added value. Okay, so moving on, we plan to restore all the additional revenues that we took out this year because of COVID, facility use fees, bus trip revenues. We don't add any additional staffing next year, so we haven't even included the support staff that we've added this year for COVID and mitigation. We've actually taken that out, all that temporary staffing out. Those positions are all funded with the CARES Act funding anyway. We haven't included salary increases in this. We're also losing some funding for categorical programs, specifically our Strong Workforce Program that currently is funding some positions within the district, and basically we're using it to leverage, and it's really aiding with the unrestricted side of our budget. However, we can't continue to fund staff with those funds, so those people will be moving back into the unrestricted general fund and covered there. Also, all the vacancy savings that I mentioned before, they need to be added in for next year. Our STRS and PERS rates, those have been going up every year, as you know, in significant amounts. The STRS rate, we actually have another break this year. We had a discount. We weren't increased, which was very helpful to our overall budget. Next year, we'll see the same thing. We're not going to see an increase. The following year, however, we go up to 18.1%, which is an increase from, as you can see there, 16 to 18.10%. And that's not an increase on a rate. That means that's a 2.1% increase against all certificated payroll. So when you're applying 2.1% to $30 million, which is around what our certificated payroll, it's pretty significant numbers. Same thing with our PERS rate. That increases by about 2.7% next year and then goes up to 26.3% in 22-23. I have included attrition savings in this, as I always do. $125,000 in salary savings represents on average probably 3 to 4, could be more, retirees where someone retires and we hire someone at a lesser salary. And then I've included step and column increases. That's an annual occurrence for us. On average, for certificated staff, it can range anywhere from 1.7 to over 2%, depending on the year. Same thing with classified staff. I've added 2% step and column for classified staff, and I believe this is actually not correct. It's 1.89 for next year, and then it's 1.7 the year after %. And just for reference, this year our step and column was 1.98% for certificated staff. And then we are contributing our contributions to Measure A. It's going up every year with staffing cost increases. This is something that we continue to contribute to this program to maintain all of Measure A programs because, as I mentioned before, the amount of parcel tax revenues that we receive from Measure AA do not fully cover the program as we had identified it prior with the Measure A parcel. Hi, Kim. You have a question?
I have a question and or comment. This is a super important page for folks who are watching and wondering, gee, what do we do with all that increased revenue? As you mentioned, Todd, these things happen irrespective of anything we do. So significant increase in the cost of STRS that just happened. So that takes up this revenue that we're getting without us doing anything. PERS, the step and column, I mean, that's that between the two groups, well over $500,000, maybe close to $750,000, I believe. And that, so these are super important slides. They seem kind of innocuous, but they actually show a place where if you're doing, say, your household budget and I get $1 in a account, where's the dollar going? Even though I don't make a choice to spend the dollar this way, it's like paying your utility bill, I suppose. These are very big amounts that increase every year, irrespective of any choice we make. So it's super easy to say, oh, we got extra revenue, we got more revenue. But these are eating into that. We have to think about, as I said earlier tonight, the entire picture, not part of the picture. Can you comment on that?
Yes, thank you. So yeah, these are just ongoing. I call them on the natural costs because, like you said, we don't have control over them. They're based on salary schedule, step and column, but also whatever the rates are for our STRS and PERS. And it doesn't really end there because our rates often change too for our other payroll liabilities, such as our workers' comp rate. Unemployment has been at a historic low for many, 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 many years. However, we had one time during the recession had some very large payments that we were required to do to unemployment. So all those things change annually as far as the percentages, but they are pretty significant when you take into account, as I mentioned, $30 million in staff salaries that these things are applied to. Just to give you some reference, step and column for certificated staff had a cost of about $451,000 this year. Classified staff was approximately $200,000. We expect similar increases next year. And then also with the STRS and PERS increase, like I said, we were lucky this year that we didn't have those increases because of the budget adoption and them providing a discount and relief for districts. But next year, that increase for classified staff is going to amount to about $200,000. And then when we go into the following year with percentage on both bargaining units, it'll probably be in excess of $600,000, $700,000.
Thank you, Todd. I just thought that was super important to point out that, as I said earlier, you can pick a number and say, oh, but everything else can go if the wage increases. But in fact, all of these to maintain the status quo are cost increases.
Thank you. So I just noticed my battery is dying, so I'm going to switch computers real quick. Can you grab it? Oh, yeah. All right, let's see how long we can go here.
Do you need it for your HD?
Yeah, this one. Okay, so now I just, I thought it'd be good to just go over the multi-year projection process and how I'm looking at things when I'm looking at the financial conditions over a multi-year basis with the school district, and how some of those assumptions that I just went through are going to impact things, and how they look when we put it into some form of a model to see how that rolls forward. So if you give me a minute, I'm just going to switch documents. Okay, so this is my multi-year projection tool. This is what I use to do our multi-year projections for our outlook of our finances. As you can see right here, this is the unrestricted side of the budget. I'm just going to focus on that. There's a whole other restricted side, and as I mentioned before, that's used for very specific programs, restricted programs, and oftentimes does not have an impact on, our reserve or what our overall financial condition of the district is.
I know, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Came out of your dock.
Okay.
Does it fit there? I'll bring your dock.
Don't worry about it. Okay, so moving through this, as you can see right here, the 2021 budget, we have all of the adjustments that I talked about in second interim included or incorporated into these numbers. We have the adjustments to revenue, the increases, to all the different revenue sources that I mentioned. The contributions, some of the savings that we were experiencing in special ed would show up here in this contribution column. And what contributions are basically amounts that we contribute from the unrestricted general fund to restricted program sources, and such as special ed and routine maintenance. So looking at that, all of the Okay. Well, that's about as big. I think that's about as big as I can go here. Okay, so moving through here, salaries have all been adjusted according to all those vacancy savings we were talking about earlier, benefits as well. Any increases here, the transfers out here, the 953 would have been reduced from what we saw at first interim because of the additional school nutrition funding. So looking at the bottom line here, the net increase to fund balance, that represents our revenues minus expenditures. So that's that 1.975 number I talked about before, and I highlighted why we ended up with 1.975. So moving forward and looking at things, you'll notice here in the next year, property taxes and the LCFF revenue limit sources, as they're called, increases. So this includes my 3.25% property tax increase. It includes the add of the $250,000 in COP funding. It also includes our increased obligation to our charter school for the in lieu tax obligation, which goes up by about $80,000 next year. That actually takes away from the revenue. And then you follow down, and I've added some COLA increases for federal and state programs. And then I've added in some of the local revenue I've talked about in the past here, the bus pass revenue. Sorry.
Is that go to your other computer? It's actually.
No, it died. Oh, this is going well.
Yeah.
I got it. All right, here we go again. I apologize for that delay and the technical difficulties here. So one thing I do want to highlight here on the multi-year projection in the 1 year out is, the difference in the contributions here. So as I mentioned before, that's the amount that we contribute to our restricted funds, special programs such as special ed and some other restricted programs. Pretty significant numbers. We have a pretty large contribution to special education that exceeds what revenue we get from the state and from our SELPA. This increases pretty substantially from 8.7 million to about almost 9.4, and the reason for that is we add back in step and column increases for next year, but then we also have to add in all those vacancy savings, and as I showed you before, that's pretty substantial. So that's why we see a big contribution increase. Looking down at certificated salaries, we see that 20.8 million, which is what we have in the current year budget as of second interim for certificated salaries, moves forward as our base for next year. And then applied to that is a step and column increase. So right now we're projecting almost $400,000 for step and column. In addition, all of the vacancy savings I mentioned before, as well as some of the loss in categorical funding that we're going to experience. So now we have to move those salaries over to the unrestricted side of our budget, need to be added back in. So that includes all of the vacancy savings, changes in funding, but also subtracts out the attrition savings that we include in every year of $125,000. So the net increase to that is about $243,000. So combined, just looking at those two, we're looking at, $545,000 in more than what we have in the current year budget. Same thing, moving on to classified salaries, 8.2 million becomes the base here. We have $165,000 in step and column. And then we have to add back in all those vacancies once again, all the custodial overtime I talked about, special education IAs that are moving funding sources. We have increases that we took out for custodial subs, transportation vacancies. All that gets added back in, $340,000, pretty large number. Moving on to employee benefits, all of those increases add to the overall benefits with not only payroll liabilities, but also health and welfare benefits. So all that trickles down along with the step and column increases as well. So kind of moving through the budget, there's changes, there's some one-time expenditures in here that are included next year that aren't included in the out years. But really, I just want to show how things kind of transition from 1 year to the next. And looking at next year in comparison to this year, the revenues minus expenditures leave us with $782,000. So significantly decreases from what we're seeing this year. So when I look on a multi-year basis, this $782 is what I look at as being available. So that's our revenues exceed our expenditures by $782,000. So same thing for the next years. It's the same deal. We have increases to revenue, also increases to our contributions because costs go up and increase in those other programs as well on the restricted side. We have increases to step and column, anything that we need to add back into the budget from the prior year, et cetera. So in the out year there, the revenues minus expenditures are $939,000. So kind of looking at this and how I look at how things may impact our district moving forward as far as increases to our budget, I can show kind of an example of how things would look. And I know there's been a lot of discussion about 2 versus 3%. I want to show just for effect purposes what the impact of that is. So if I'm looking at a 2% increase, and this would be for everybody in the district, all staff. That amount is about $950,000. So if I include that in all the out years, what I'm seeing here is that this year we're good because we have all those savings this year that's covering things. We still have $1 million left that's going to drop down to our reserve. However, the following year, we start seeing some strain on the budget, and this is showing $167,000 in the negative. It's not really a true deficit at this point because we do have some one-time expenditures that are included up here that are being pulled from our assigned reserves that are reserved for instructional materials and some other things. So we're taking from that fund balance to cover that, and that's the purpose of those funds, is we're setting those aside in order to pay for textbook adoptions and one-time payments that we need for our programs. So right here, really what we're looking at is that our budget still with this 2% is pretty fairly balanced. If I take into account those one-time expenditures we're pulling from our assigned reserves. So we're still looking pretty good there. If I start looking at higher numbers, 3%, the amount of that is about $1,475,000. All right. Okay, so then you start seeing a much greater strain on the budget, where our increase this year drops down to $500,000. That again will drop down the reserve. But then you're moving back into a deficit spending mode, a pretty significant one. So looking at that, when I'm going through these projections, it's all based on the assumptions that I shared before. Things can obviously change. At this point, I'm including everything that I know right now using the best information we have. So I will not know what potential property tax increases we'll be seeing until I'm able to talk with the assessor in April and May. And even at that point, it's very preliminary. They give me a very early kind of just where they are with the tax roll there, because they have through the end of June, July in order to finish their tax roll. So at that point in April, May, when I'm developing my budget, they have very minimal information. But they can tell me if it's looking like it's greater than 3.25, and that's usually what I go with. Same thing with other revenue sources. Once we get the May revise with the state budget this year, we'll have an idea whether there might be some other funding available, if they're going to increase any other funding that we receive as a district. Same thing with the salaries. We're still working on staffing for next year, so there could be changes to the staffing numbers. There could be some savings. We could receive additional retirements that we're not anticipating right now that leads to additional attrition savings. All those things are kind of in the process now of planning for and figuring that piece out. But for right now, I have to assume that kind of what we have in place is going to move forward to the next fiscal year. So with that, is there any questions on just the multi-year projection?
Todd, I was actually wondering, for the sake of just being able to see the numbers, can you run through the model what a 2.5 raise would look like? I'm guessing that would be somewhere in the range of 1.2 per year. You know what I'm saying, like in that?
Yeah, it probably would be. It would be the same effect, though. It would essentially go into probably a deficit at this point. I just wanted to show you these as an example.
No, this is great. I think it's actually, frankly, one of the best presentations I've ever seen in the school district, and also in particular from your department, because, it's very difficult. All of us, myself in particular, of course, Galen is the exception as well as Kim, But for numbers that are this complex, to be able to really see them in the multi-year, it's really helpful to see them changing over time. Because we're so used to just looking at them sort of statically in the moment and what that looks like. It's really hard to make a decision when you know that whatever decision you make, you have to live with permanently. So it's one thing to make like a one-time bonus type of agreement for staff, and it's a very different conversation when you know it's built in permanently in the out years. Right, so for me, it's really helpful to understand, to see what it looks like, not just 3 years out, but frankly, I mean, we're looking at, much longer than 3 years. It's a commitment that we make permanently to our staff if we do a raise of any type. So Kim has her hand up.
Thank you, Kirsten. Kim has her hand up.
Thank you. I can't help but nerding out on this stuff. And Kirsten, that's an amazing observation that you made, is everything we do now is a promise, and that stays through the future. And I just think it's important when we look at Todd's multi-year projections, he's putting in a 2 or 3% increase for this year, and he's putting the same number in the future years, means 0 raise, 0 raise, 0 raise. And we know that's not what our employees want or what we want to do. So that's why it's so important to set ourselves up for long-term success, right? So whatever we do this year is going to compound into the future years. So Kirsten, I really appreciate what you had to say, in that it adds on to each other every single year. And that's not considered in what Todd's doing right now.
Exactly. And the other thing, too, that I think it's really unique to point out, which is the 3.25%, which is our assessed revenue, which is what the primary source of our revenue, right, which is the assessed value of the real estate of this community, is exactly what is causing, if you will, the housing crisis for our staff. So what's filling our piggy bank is also causal to the sort of housing crisis that the staff are feeling. So we hear you, because we understand how hard it is to buy a home in this community, because we've become a darling community in the state of California where everyone wants to leave the urban centers and move up here. And to many of the public comments points, they're moving here because we have become a destination school district. So it's the teaching staff and it's everyone who works for this district who created the attractive community that we live in, right? And we know that because we've worked so hard to construct that and cultivate that. But what is happening is it's punishing our staff indirectly. So for us, we're trying to be, egalitarian in making our decisions, because we understand that it's because of the teachers' hard work that people are coming here, which I hope everyone really understands, that we really do honor and recognize that that's your hard work is what's causing this economic and housing bump in our community. But in every way, what we want to do is say thank you to you and give you the grace of having an income that you can live on. But we're also at the same time sort of beholden to this magical percentage that changes constantly. In the recession years, it was like -7. In the great years, it was positive, 10, right? So we have to model our numbers knowing that we can keep our budget, what's the word? Solvent over time, but yet at the same time, It's the teachers and it's the district staff and it's the bus drivers, it's the cafeteria workers, it's the executive team, it's the tech team, it's everyone who made the school district what it is. So we as board members are literally balancing, we're like balancing all of these variables to try to make a decision constantly what's best for everyone. So thank you, Todd, for helping, I think, all of us and hopefully the public and hopefully, you know, our departments understand how complicated these decisions are. They're not made in a vacuum. It's not just throwing out a 1% or a 2% or a 3%. It's like hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of analyzing what goes into the decision. So if I could just reiterate the fact that I want everyone to know that we value every single member of our team. We want to take good care of you so you can live here and raise your families. But this is such a complicated decision. And we passionately want everyone to really understand that we are not at war with you over your salary. We are on your side, and that we want we have the very best intentions of making the decision that works best for everyone and that keeps this district solvent in the long run. So, Todd, I just want to say thank you. I mean, I'm so moved by how compelling this is because there's so much at stake. There's so much at stake. And if we put back in all these positions that are currently vacant, which I wasn't 100% sure we were going to do. I was thinking, oh, we have all these vacancies. Why can't we just find some wiggle room, right? That would make sense. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. $1.9 million is a lot of money. But when you actually look at it and you boil it down to $782,000, that's very different. So thank you for illuminating that because I was really confused when I first saw these numbers. I was really confused. And now I feel very much educated and enlightened as to how to move forward. So, thanks, Todd. I'm not worthy. I mean, this is just great. This is just great. So helpful.
Thank you, Kirsten. Todd, were you finished?
Well, I still have a couple more slides, as long as there's no other question on,
Sorry, I was moved
on this.
by the moment.
If everyone's okay with this, I'll move forward. So looking on a multi-year basis, as you saw, you know, in the previous slide, you know, with our balances increasing year over year. And that's, of course, if we don't change anything. We just move everything forward as we showed in that multi-year projection. We're looking at a $10.4 million reserve at 13.91% this year. Next year, that grows to $11.5 million to 15.67, and continues on with growth into $12.1 million at 16.42%. Now we know it's not going to end up that way, but that would just be if everything, all else is equal, and that's what we stayed on and just move forward. So looking at the reserve graph based on those numbers, we see the minimum district board policy 3100 reserve requirement of 10 to 16%, and how that impacts those parameters. And you'll see the numbers just continue to increase and actually fall pretty outside of that window of 10 to 17 or 10 to 16%. So projections are looking good, obviously, and the reserve is continuing to grow. So moving forward, what's coming next? The governor's May revised budget will be coming out shortly, so hopefully we'll have more details on that. The state right now is seeing record revenues as far as what they projected originally with their adopted budget. I think they're in excess of $25 billion over what they projected. So there is some talk about potential for one-time monies. We'll have to see what that looks like next year. Also, the Assembly Bill 86, which a lot of you have heard about, which included two different programs. One was the return to school grants, If school districts return to in-person instruction by April 1st, they could receive a per pupil amount for that. Also, what are called the expanded learning grants, which originally that amount of $4.6 billion the governor had included in his January budget proposal for next year, legislatures decided to combine those two. So now we're looking at the expanded learning grants and the return to school grants being awarded this year and straddling into next year. The expectation is that you'll receive funding in May, half of it in May and half of it in August. And there's some requirements to be eligible. There isn't a lot of detail on the actual audit requirements or any specifics on exactly how we have to spend this money and how we're going to have to report it. But the expectation is that we will see some of that money. My thought on this as well is most of this money, of course, we're going to look for opportunities to see if we can leverage any existing expenditures, but most of it is going to be applied really towards addressing learning loss mitigation in the current fiscal year, but also moving into next year and even the following year possibly, and additional staffing supports and what that looks like. And we're still kind of planning how we may use those funds. Like I said, we haven't received them in hand yet, but the expectation is that we will see some of that. And then the federal relief package that was just passed by the Biden administration for $1.9 trillion. That's another thing, another funding source that could give us a substantial amount. It looks like some of those dollars are fairly flexible, but we'll have to wait on some of the details on that, on how it's going to be distributed, what our potential amount may be for our school district, and how we use those funds. That being said, all of those funds really looking at one-time sources, and we have a lot of planning to do for next year, probably a lot of additional expenditures. We still don't even really know what additional COVID-19 related cost we expect to experience through the end of this year and into next year. Whether there's still going to be mitigation in place, mask wearing, all those different details, we're kind of staying tuned. So as we move forward, we're just going to be planning on next year's budget, what we want to do programmatically for addressing some of these issues related to COVID, and then working on budget and LCAP development. Is there any questions?
Any questions from the board?
I have a comment. Question?
Are there any public comments, Ed?
There are no call-in public comments and no in-person.
Thank you. So back to the board for comments.
Thank you, Galen. I just wanted to, again, compliment Todd on that we talked about earlier, but your whole display of what's out there and making it so that we can all kind of see it. I also want to make a comment in the reference to the actual transparency by doing this. I think you sort of opened it up so everyone can understand in layman's terms and in Kim's brain what's actually happening. But I also think it's important to understand that we're being extremely transparent, and I think that's something that I want everyone to realize that there are no secrets. Like, we're not holding out and we're not trying to. There's no padding anywhere else, but I think that your transparency is amazing and awesome. And I also just wanted to make a note that I think Kim has mentioned this at numerous times, and we've also said it, that teachers are definitely an integral part of how we run our programs and everything here. And we've always given when we can, and we've always given as much as we can. And I think that that's something that, we've never not, when we had extra, put it back to the teaching entities on all levels and even the staff. And I think we made a big turn a couple of years ago when we increased everybody from management down to classified. Everybody was supported and recognized. And I think it's important just to reiterate that if there is a chance that things change, it's definitely what our plan is. But as you said, there's revisions. And if there is something that does come down the pipe and we're way off and all of a sudden we get tons of something, then there's obviously a chance to relook at it. But by looking at what you've presented, and in order to say, fiduciarily sound, and there's so many, I laugh at the word questions, there's so many unknowns at this point. All the money that we had to spend to get our kids back to school, to mitigate the classrooms, to making sizes of the desks, but all that, everything. There's a lot more expenses, and it may still be more, but to sort of not put ourselves in a stable situation, I think it's not smart on our side, and it's not something that we as a board can actually say that we feel comfortable doing. But I do want to note that, we have always tried to give as much as we can. So if there is a way that we can, I'm sure we will re-look at it in order to move forward and to be successful at what we've had. Hats off. Like, we're going back 5 days a week. We have had relatively limited numbers of COVID cases within our district. I think we've played our cards really, really well, and to sort of put a sour tone on what we've done is disheartening for sure. But seriously, we may be slow in rolling it out because we want to make it a better move. And I think that as much as I would love to give everyone money, I think, I applaud you for what you've done and how you've presented it, and I hope it makes sense to everybody that's out there that we really want to make the best out of all this, and that's kind of what we've put out there. We're not, putting out something that we don't think we can hold self true to. And I hope that our focus can switch, and that we can actually focus on getting our kids back to school and not necessarily, anything beyond that.
Thank you, Dee Dee. I would ditto all of that. Kim, do you have any comments? No. So we need to approve this interim report. Can I have a motion?
Thank you very much, team. I'm going to make a motion to approve the second interim report presented.
I'll second.
Member Levant?
Aye.
Member Hensy?
Aye.
Member Driller?
Aye.
President Surek?
Yes.
Clerk Larson?
Yes.
Thank you.
And Todd, thank you very much. That was clear.
Great job, Todd.
First time, I mean, it was almost as good as pictures. So now we move into board policy. I don't think we had any questions on any of the board policies. Would it be okay with the board to bring these back on the consent agenda the next board meeting?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Board business, comments from board members. Chris, would you like to start?
I don't have a lot to report other than I attended my first high school girls soccer game of the season. Yay to all the kids and coaches and the powers that be that are letting those kids play. And let's see, I also took this week and a little bit of last week and visited all the lakeside schools and just checked in with secretaries and whichever admin was available, just to say hi, kind of like the good old days. And I hope to make some time in the next week or two and do the same thing on the Truckee side. Susie, I'm coming for you. I'm coming to visit you.
Thank you, Chris. Dee Dee?
I don't have much to say, but I'm just wanting to say thank you for getting us all to this point. I have done just some visits to the North Tahoe School, North Tahoe High, and Tahoe Lake as well, just again, and I think Chris just said it, like the good old days, it's kind of nice to be able to go back in. So I haven't made it to all the classrooms as much as I have just sort of gotten into the door, but definitely excited that we're moving forward, and I appreciate the patience, but also the slow motion. I'm not into the fast dropping it out, so I appreciate everyone's support. And just, gosh, happy kids. It's interesting too, just quickly though, that I talked to some of my ski team families, and I was like, but you guys have been in school? They're like, Dee Dee, we can be outside. I was like, oh yeah, we're not there yet. So it's hard to compare to anyone else because we are so unique and so special. And we can't be really outside. So hats off to the fact that we actually are playing sports. And what a huge success to get us to where we have happy children and happy teachers and happy parents.
Thanks, Dee Dee. Kirsten?
Just again, to just reiterate the fact that it's so exciting that we are going back into 5 days a week. I have a very excited 16-year-old in my house who can't wait to get back to see all of her friends in cohort A. She's in cohort B, and everywhere I go, I hear positive feedback from the community, from everyone. And then, it's really also a gift, the fact that we are so small and agile, nimble enough to be able to do this, because I have nieces and nephews in San Diego Unified and Los Angeles Unified, and man, they are not even touching it. They're not even talking about going back, except for really small groups of like special needs children. And San Diego Unified has 30,000 students who have asthma, so their risk factors are really high, and they can't do what we're doing. So we are so blessed, and just thank you to everyone. I had to chuckle when I read your email, Carmen, that you had ordered 700 new desks, right? Just to think logistically about how that is getting deployed, the custodian staff, everyone who's making that happen, it's amazing. I would love to see a little video, a film, a micro-lapsed film of just how all the little ants and everything is making it all happen, because it's got to be just such an endeavor. So hats off to Ms. Geisels for your leadership and your courage to make this happen, and the vaccinations. I can't even believe that happened still. And I traveled to Houston and I wore my little sticker, I'm vaccinated. I got some definite side eye. But being in Texas, gotta say, it's a different world down there, and it's night and day. So we are really gifted to be where we are, to be able to do what we're doing, and just thank you to everyone. I have to stop drinking coffee before I come to these meetings.
Thank you, Kirsten. Kim?
Thanks so much, Galen. Just a couple things. First of all, I just want to acknowledge the amazing letters we got from, I believe it was 8 7th grade students from North Tahoe School in the ELD class of our wonderful teacher, Kristen Sura. And they are talking about civic engagement. And so they wrote us about their opinions about going to 5-day-a-week schooling, which I just loved. Every time I get to interact with the kids, which we all know we're craving this year, which is why I'm so grateful to Greg for doing a presentation on Sierra High. So thank you for that, and so appreciated. And the other big thing that's going on right now, and I know this because I have a senior in high school, it is college acceptance time. And in particular, our California schools, our UCs in particular, are sending out their acceptance or not information right now. So our seniors who have had a crazy year are going through that process. And it was very fascinating. The UCs reported that their applications were up 16.2%. And I've heard some great results for our kids, and I can't wait to hear more and more competition to get into that quote unquote favorite or ideal place they want to go to school, because I know they're going to go do great wherever they go. So I'm excited to hear about that as we go through this school year and situation that we're allowed to have this year. So that's my report for tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Kim. I'd like to recognize Superintendent Geisels. I mean, there has been so much going this way, turning right, turning around, going backwards. Oh, a new rule. Oh, get that snow off that field. You know, it gives me a headache every time I hear the latest status of, and then trying to keep everybody informed at the same time. I just want to recognize all that extra effort. I do have one thing besides that. I told you about attempting to attend the academic team. Turns out our Truckee High academic team is 12 wins, 0 losses this year. And they have the playoffs starting Monday, which I won't be able to attend. North Tahoe is in second place. So we are really taking care of Nevada this year.
Because they won't let us come play.
Yeah. So thank you very much. I think the meeting is over.
Great.